Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Behind the Screens podcast, brought to you by DSQ and myself, Sir Pigasus. Today we're here with a very, very special guest. It's a man of many talents, but he would describe himself as the SSA Vibes Director. I'm not sure about that. I'll just call him Mr. SSA. It's the man, the myth, the legend himself, Greybeard. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on.
And it's a pleasure to be here. I'd never miss a chance to spread the gospel of SSA Rocket League. So yeah, I'm keen.
Well, we'll start with that intro I just gave you. Vibe Director is what you've got on your Twitter handle. It's the one that I see you talk about on all the socials. But when someone who's, say, not as in tune with SSA Rocket League and would just hear that immediately and go, oh, yeah, that actually makes sense as someone who's been around, say a family member is coming in or producer Fred who has not much idea about Rocket League, how would you describe your position in the scene to, you know, a more open aspect, let's just say?
It's a little bizarre, and I've settled on that because it kind of covers it. I have no official title. I have no authority here whatsoever. I fell into this role by accident. I've tried to keep myself independent, so I'm not attached to any org. I'm not employed by anybody. I am literally a guy who is really wants SSA Rocket League to succeed, and more particularly the SSA players to find success, to grow this game. So I'm an evangelist for the game, for the players, for the competitive scene. So there is no official title whatsoever, other than I just want this to do well.
Well, you've been in the scene, obviously, for quite some time now. You have established yourself as that man in SSA, and I feel like many players have you to thank for quite a lot, whether it's organizing events, just promoting the scene in general. You know, I probably wouldn't have been as interested in the scene if it wasn't for someone like you leading the charge that much. And, you know, I've come over. I've been a bit of an import. I'm sure that's a topic we'll get into later in terms of the production at the very least. But let's go back a bit. Let's go to the very beginning. You end up on Rocket League. How does that happen? What was it about Rocket League that got you into this scene? Both as a player and as, you know, the man of SSA as well.
So I am an older person, as is very clear to see, and I went through a classic midlife crisis when I was in my mid-40s, and I was trying to figure out things I wanted to do. And my son at that time was, you know, he was a gamer. I think he was playing StarCraft or one of those games. Ooh, and I thought, well, let me try gaming. Maybe that's something that'll entertain me in my downtime. So I put together a very basic gaming rig, and I tried a bunch of games. I played your sort of story games. I played Hitman. I played Tomb Raider. So I played a bunch of games, and I enjoyed them, but I wasn't hooked by them. And I was going through a period of experimentation. And I don't know if you remember, one of the big social medias back in those days was 9gag, which I found myself on and I used to enjoy.
Wow.
And people started posting Rocket League clips. And it was literally a clip. I was like, what is this game? This looks amazing. So I bought it. And as it happened, it was a month after the full public release. So August of 2015, I bought the game, I downloaded it, and still to this day, I can't fully explain what grabbed me about it, but I fell in love with the game. I loved playing it. And it was probably the fact that the games were 5 minutes long. So I only had to focus for 5 minutes at a time. And I was horrendous at it. I didn't play online. I literally played on my own. I played with bots. And I played casual. I think I played casual for close to 2 years before I even realized there was like a ranking system. And then, and that's how it was for 4 years. I wasn't involved in the community. I didn't have friends on Steam. I played by myself. It was entirely a selfish exercise, but I loved the game. And after 4 years, 2019, and I was putting a lot of hours into the game, and it occurred to me that perhaps with all the time I'm spending, I should make it more productive if I can, or I need to go and do something else because I'm sinking a lot of hours into a game I'm never going to be good at. And so I thought, let me start a YouTube channel. And the entire hook of the YouTube channel was, can I be the oldest grand champion in the world? I thought that would be a fun sort of through line for the YouTube channel. So I started this channel. I think I was Diamond 2 at the time, and that's after 4 years. and so it began. And because I had the channel, I then became connected with the local community, and the local community was tiny. I mean, there was hardly anybody in there, but it was a lot of fun. Long story short, so this was 2019, and then 2020 the pandemic arrived, and suddenly my life, which involved a lot of travel, all became focused at home. And in all honesty, Rocket League is what got me through the pandemic. As a, being at home a lot, it allowed me to be part of something, connected to something. And initially I got involved in the EU scene with RSC and casting for them. And I just loved being a part of that. And then 2021 was when SSA got included into RLCS, and because I was already sort of involved in doing things, it was a natural transition to, oh wow, this is amazing, and it kind of just grew from there. We were now part of the global scene, and clearly had a lot of catching up to do. But so how can we make the game bigger? How can we close that massive skill gap and actually be globally competitive? And that's the fight that continues to this day.
Wow, that's honestly an incredible story to think that it all started just with a few posts out there as well. I know for me personally, it was a YouTube video I saw. It was also like a funny moments kind of video that I saw on YouTube by someone called The Gaming Lemon many years ago, and it was a one-off video. I watched that one time, and immediately I said to my friend who I watched it with, we've got to get this game. And now it's kind of become everything. So it's kind of funny how just these little things, these little posts bring people into the game. But weirdly enough, you've now put yourself in that position for SSA where you probably are that for a lot of people in the scene at this point now. And I'm wondering if anyone has ever told that to you, but I will tell you now, guaranteed that's the case for someone realizing that they can play competitive in SSA as well. But one thing I also wanted to ask, heading back to things, is did you have any prior broadcasting experience, public speaking, some kind of, throwing yourself out there, things that you've done in your time before getting into Rocket League? Or was that YouTube channel truly the start of it all? Because you seem a natural, you are professional.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much been, at the time that I took up the YouTube channel, I'd been a conference speaker for about 10 years and had a lot of experience in radio, some TV, podcasting. So that sort of thing was sort of part of my varied careers and jobs and so on. So yeah, I was fortunate in that regard, is that I didn't have to learn that side of it. I'd kind of dealt with all my issues around that, and so I was quite happy to jump into that role.
Yeah, I came to this maybe with a few school public speakings. That's about as much experience as I had heading into things.
But
maybe, maybe I got a few years, yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? It's all of these things are great, and being able and willing and enjoying doing it is such an incredible skill. When I got into public speaking, I was amazed that people would pay for someone to come and speak, because but it is a skill that you can develop, and everything you do, your school public speaking, your casting. This is. Yes. For me, casting came late in my life, late in my career, but it was helped by that early experience. So wherever you go from here, your experience doing this podcast, getting on and casting, it's a skill that develops, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. And guaranteed, in 3 years, you'll go back and watch this episode of the podcast, and you'll absolutely cringe because it's like, oh my God, was I that bad? Whereas right now you're not. It's the natural progression of it. So it's very good you're doing it.
Don't worry, I do that like 5 minutes afterwards when I watch it back. But
no, you have to get to a point where you enjoy the sound of your own voice, and you know you've progressed when you can listen to yourself do a 15 or 20-minute thing that you recorded without cringing to death. Then you know you're making progress.
Yeah, perhaps I'm somewhat getting there with my casting now. I am somewhat getting there where I can watch it back a bit happier than I used to be. So to say, but you know, it is all fantastic experience, and I do like that schools do promote that as well. Like I know that I actually do have a lot to thank my schools for giving me those opportunities, because they weren't very common at the ones I went to anyways, and now I've got a lot to thank that for. But you mentioned it earlier, you aiming to be the oldest GC in Rocket League. I do remember a post from you, it must have been a few years back now, saying that you did actually end up hitting GC. I'm curious, did you ever...
Can I show you that? Look at that.
Oh, that is incredible. What?
That's how excited I was about it.
That is amazing. I was just gonna point out the like Grand Champ logo you had in your background. That's way cooler. That's just way cooler. I'm curious if you ever found out. Are you up there? Are you number one, top 5, top 10? Have you any idea?
I claimed that I was the oldest in the world just because I did look to see who was. Sunless years ago did a thing, and he was 39. I know there's a 43-year-old SSL now, but as far as I know, I was the oldest. I was the oldest grand champion, so I claimed the title, and I was happy to keep the title until otherwise challenged. But sadly, I was a grand champ for 3 glorious seasons, and then there was a hard-ish reset, I think, in season 11, and I've struggled since then. And now I've gone back to just being rubbish at Rocket League, but I'll get back there eventually.
You know, I know the exact season you're talking about, because I think after that season, if you look at my tracker, it's like 300 games a season, 300 games a season, 20. As soon as that drop happened, I just stopped playing the game big time. If anything, it was quite healthy for me in my casting career, because I just stopped playing the game as much and, you know, focused on other things like school and stuff. You know, that random stuff.
That's probably very good. Well. And my frustration is that every week I go, maybe this is the week I'll finally have enough of Rocket League, and it just never happens. And so I still play a lot. The amount of time I spend, and look, I'm very fortunate in that I'm able to, but I'm this game I played a lot, and then obviously do whatever else around it.
I'm curious, and you don't have to, I'm not asking you to go into detail. I'm asking, like, do the rest of your family, are they aware that you are Greybeard, the face of SSA, of video game car football? How in tune are they with it? Because I know that for me, it was definitely something to explain to my parents at some point. Sorry, I'm going to be like shouting at my computer, but it's for a good reason, I promise this time. Whereas
it's all legit.
It's all legit, I promise. Whereas for you, it's the other way round, and I feel like that is an interesting shift in dynamic in that sense.
Very much so, and I think I've gotten them fairly. It's my wife certainly is very aware of the time and effort I put in and what I'm doing. And you know, we've traveled together to a number of lands. We were at Worlds in Düsseldorf.
That's amazing.
So it's given us an excuse to travel, and my wife is Melissa is she, amongst other things, is a photographer. So she's taken some fantastic photos at Worlds. Any local lands we've been to, she's gone and photographed. So she's been kind of documenting a lot of that as much as she can, and as we travel and go to these things. So she's very much involved and part of it. And then my son, who moved to the Netherlands a couple of years ago, nice. He's very much aware of it, and I think I know that he, I landed up on First Touch for an interview about a year ago, and he was incredibly annoyed that I didn't tell him. because how he found out about it is one of his friends in the Netherlands was like, bro, your dad's on this podcast. So I think he thinks it's pretty cool. I mean, so yeah, so they're very much aware, and I think for the more distant family, they think it's kind of cute, this weird thing that that I'm doing. But yeah, they're as much invested in it as I am.
That is amazing. Honestly, that is amazing. I'm trying to imagine that. I've really tried to be in the shoes of him right now, and seeing a parent on a podcast just showed to me by a friend. That's a very unique circumstance to find yourself in. And also moving to the Netherlands, I must say, fantastic choice. I've got family that live in the Netherlands myself, so I absolutely love the country. I go there quite a lot. Love to go to South Africa actually one day, and I'm wondering what is it like over there? What is it like? Let this be the advertisement for the people watching for South Africa.
So South Africa is, if you are willing to pay the tax of being in South Africa, and by tax I mean we have really weird issues that we have power issues, we have water issues, we have social issues, and if you come to understand that and navigate those, I honestly believe there are very few better countries in the world to live in and to be a part of. You know, I live in Johannesburg, which is inherently probably one of the ugliest cities in the country, but it is the economic powerhouse that's where all the money gets made, and it has the best weather in the world. You know, Joburg, where I live, you know, the weather extremes at its coldest we might get to 0 in the morning in winter. And at its hottest, we're in sort of 35 degrees in summer. So that's not a massive temperature swing. And for the most part, we're living in sort of 18 to 30 degree weather for 9 months of the year. I mean, it's sensational. So from that point of view, it's fabulous. Then there's Cape Town. Cape Town that's picturesque. It's beautiful. It's a city my wife and I are considering moving to sometime in the next year or two. And it's cheap. You know, if a pound and a euro goes a very long way in South Africa. You know, if you're looking just, you know, go and have a beer, you know, what is a beer now at a Wetherspoons? It's what, like £4 or something?
Yes, yeah, around that, yeah.
So a beer here, you're probably looking at around £2, £2.50. So it's a cheap place to enjoy yourself. And you said you must absolutely come if you like SSA now. If you visited South Africa, you would be a fan for life.
And I had a friend who was South African in secondary school. Am I crazy in saying, are there penguins? I'm pretty sure one day he came home with photos of penguins. I didn't know that was a thing. Why did everyone keep that? You should start with that in future. Just some word of there's penguins, and they're so adorable. So adorable.
You know what? You could have asked me. You could have asked me to list all the amazing things to see in South Africa. You could have talked to me for an hour and a half just listing it, and I'm not sure I would have come around to penguins as like an attraction. But
there's so many things above penguins.
But yes, and those are off the coast of Cape Town, Cape Agulhas, because it's a very cold ocean. What's it? I think it's the Atlantic, right? And that's the cold side. That's where Cape Town is. And so, yeah, I mean, there are penguins by their thousands. And funnily enough, I've never gone to see them. But yes, that's a thing you could do amongst many others.
I feel like that's one of the things that if you're not local, it's so exciting. And if you are local, you roll your eyes and go, come on, there's so much better than penguins here. Come on, guys, just go to it.
It's absolutely
go somewhere else. But I like the idea of the weather. It feels like you can basically go any time of year. You said 9 months are pretty,
That's in
consistently
Joburg.
decent weather as well.
To be fair, Cape Town gets very
good.
cold and rainy and miserable in winter, and they probably have 5 or 6 months of that. And that. Listen, South Africans love to move to Cape Town because they visit Cape Town in the summer and they go, "This place is a paradise," and then they move down there, and then in their first winter, they're like, "Okay, I'm out of here." So it's not all sunshine and roses. There are the downsides, but yes, I mean, if you're going to go to Cape Town, definitely go in the summer. Joburg, you can pretty much. If you come from the Nordic countries, if you're from Denmark, you could visit South Africa in the winter. And I have seen this, Danes sunbathing in the dead of winter because it gets really cold, but the sun always shines. So they're out there suntanning, yeah.
That is incredible. And you spoke that, there are many positives to South Africa. There are some really beautiful aspects of it. But when we go into the things more Rocket League related, I want to think back to a tweet that I saw a couple years back that really changed my entire mindset on minor regions and minor Rocket League specifically. It was during, the early times of Europeans coming over and stealing spots. I'm sure you can imagine the specific team that was rumored to come over at the time. And they were putting out tweets saying, "Look, we're just coming here for a spot. We're playing the game." And I can't remember who the specific person was who put out this tweet. So if you do remember, please do remind me. But they spoke about actually the pretty daily or weekly struggles that you can have as South Africa as a contender. Typically stuff like not being able to get access to the best hardware, for example, when it comes to PC parts. Availability isn't as high as it was in other countries. And a topic that I really want to get into, load shedding. Now, people who are very familiar with the SSA scene, as recently as last Open, will of course know what this is. But I wanted to also allow this to be your floor to explain what load shedding is and how this affects SSA players that are actually within SSA and not playing over 100 ping.
If I'm not mistaken, that tweet was probably from Werty.
I think it was.
Yeah, so I think he would have. I remember him putting out something like that. So there is a frustration, and it's when you get upset about somebody, you get frustrated with somebody, a characteristic of somebody, and they are not even aware that it's a problem. For example, if a Westerner goes to Japan, you can easily offend someone there and not even know that you're doing it because you're so disconnected from their culture. And I feel like that's an issue with North Americans and with Europeans. And it's a deep sense of entitlement that they're not even aware that they have. And they're not aware of how good they've got it in terms of infrastructure, in terms of access to hardware, in terms of access to things that your ordinary South African might be struggling with. And I know it's something I get frustrated with because I see European players whining about things that are like, "Oh my God, are you joking me?" And so that's an issue. And so let's talk about load shedding. And to be fair, for the last 11 months or so, it hasn't been much of a problem. We had it a little bit last weekend. But other than that, for the last year, we've been in pretty good shape. But so South Africa went through a 10-year period of brutal corruption. And one of the consequences of that was that our electrical infrastructure was not maintained and was allowed to fall apart. And because of this, our power generation units began to fail, and there wasn't enough capacity to keep the lights on in the entire country. So they introduced what's generally referred to as rolling blackouts, which means because we have to turn off a percentage of the lights all day. And so how that works is we will turn off power. Every area gets to be off for a certain number of hours per day. And there's a published schedule. So it's like, that, okay, your power is going to be off from 8 till 10 o'clock in the morning. And then again from 4 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 8 o'clock at night. And just as RLCS got underway, we went through a year and a half of brutal load shedding. So so players were struggling, and you have to have backup power, and if you don't have backup power, and it's like, okay, you're going to be off from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night. That's right at the times when you're supposed to be playing quals or RLCS finals if you made the top 16 or top 8.
Yes.
So that was a massive, massive issue for players for the first couple of seasons of RLCS. So a lot of people have managed to work out some kind of backup power, but you had bizarre situations where a guy's power was going off, so he packed up his entire PC to drive 40 minutes to get to a gaming arena or to a relative's house that has power and plug it in there. There was a famous picture from with Olympic during one of the seasons. He played a top 8 game, literally running his PC off his car battery. So we have that sort of thing, and then we have every country's got its poverty issues, and South Africa's poverty issue is massive. There is you will notice that the vast majority of Rocket League players are white and middle class. We have a massive population who don't even have access to a PlayStation, an Xbox, a PC. So they are going to, there's an entire pool there to which we have no access because they aren't even playing the game because they're unable to. Mobile gaming is a growing segment there because most people have access to mobile, and data access is becoming more and more ubiquitous. But those are the struggles. And then because we're kind of remote to the rest of the world, a PC that's costing, let's say, $1,000 in North America or £800 or £1,200 in the UK is going to be closer to $2,500 here because by the time it's imported and tariffs and import duties and all of that, so it is pricey to get access to equipment. So we have those issues. So it's a battle just to be able to play the game. And then you've got Europeans who, have natural access to all of this, and they're like, and we're much better. So I'll just play from my lounge and smack down these SSA players who are shit at the game. So so there we go. I don't know if I've painted the picture adequately enough there.
No, I really appreciate that. And I think this is something that people need to hear more often as well. I feel like people are too quick to go, why is SSA quote unquote bad at Rocket League? It's because they haven't been in the scene for a long time. It's because there isn't much interest. It's because there isn't a lot of people playing this or that people go to immediately. When actually there's a lot more important and very integrated reasons why SSA isn't as good at Rocket League, for example. And it's actually to do with the entire culture within the Sub-Saharan Africa region in itself. It's outside of Rocket League. There is a natural disadvantage already there. I really liked your point that, most players that are playing for SSA, from SSA, are your middle-class white people typically, because naturally they are more advantageous in this position where you've got the likes of EUNA where it feels like the entry level's a bit lower because more people have the access to the internet, have themselves an Xbox, a PlayStation. I've seen that Life qualified for a top 16 in North America. He started off on his Switch. He just had a Switch. That's crazy.
That blows me away. That's worse than hearing about a keyboard mouse player. Yeah.
Exactly that. So it doesn't even start at, I need a 2.5k game station to be able to compete. People are just able to get themselves basic consoles in the first place. And I do have a few friends that actually moved from sub-Saharan African regions and said, getting an Xbox, getting a PlayStation is way more expensive where I came from than it would be over here and things like that. And I feel like that is such an important perspective to put in, especially when the idea is typically for a lot of people that are coming over is the simple line of game's the game. I'm playing by the rules and I'm doing whatever the Psionics guidelines ask for. And I know that I definitely have a few gripes with it. And there was a big campaign at the end of the last season to talk about the 2/3 rule, of course, being a big conversation for the Sub-Saharan African region. And I'm curious now that, you know, you're on here, and again, big pleasure to have your time just before the final day of SSA Open 2 to give everyone a timeline right now. And to be fair, the top 16 had quite a few SSA teams in it, teams with players from South Africa. However, as soon as we've reached this top eight stage, the mainstream, you can very much see that there's many Europeans on top, and I want to say there's a taste of North America as well somewhere. And basically, it's Limitless and Cosmico versus the world. I'm curious on, especially in comparison to RLCS 2024, where it felt like the issue was starting but growing quickly, and then RLCS 2025, where from the beginning it's kind of just been established as the norm. What is that like, both for yourself personally, as someone who lives in South Africa and has a love for a game, and someone who's also the figurehead, if we're being completely honest, with the SSA broadcast, having to cast majority players with over 100 ping? I mean, so bad that you had to include it on the graphic, by the way, which I think is both incredible and sad in its own sense.
So I have an evolving hate-hate relationship with all of this. But when it first became apparent at the start of the last season, the beginning of last year, about a year ago, I was devastated, and it is probably the closest I've ever come to going, you know what, why am I investing all of this time and energy, and maybe it's time to move on and go and do. I mean, for goodness sake, this is a video game, you know, and why am I getting so involved in it? And just walk away, go and do something else with your life. It's the closest I've ever come to reaching that point. Just because of the loss of opportunities for local players. And, you know, I've become intimately familiar with the lives of many of these players. I know them, I know their struggles, and I so badly want to see them succeed. And so that was very, very rough. To where I find myself today is that while I've reached a point of acceptance that this is making us better. And I'm not sure that Limitless will ever admit it, but they have performed better on LAN because of this. And they will say they've just been working on their own thing or whatever. But, you know, we've had a problem. We've had a team that dominated SSA. They beat anybody that came before them in SSA, but cannot beat anybody on a LAN. And it's a huge gulf that needs to be, and I do think that they are playing better. The local players are playing better. Our skill has improved more than it would have without this happening. Outside of the game directly, look at all of the attention SSA has gotten. I'm not sure that this podcast would even have happened without that. I'm not sure your interest and enjoyment of SSA would have happened without this going on. So we have had direct benefit because of it. We have some amazing coaches from Europe, from North America, who have come in here, who have picked up SSA teams to help them get better. We have local players who are connecting up with a broader network of people. And those are important, again, not just for the game, but for the rest of their lives. As you know, gaming, one of the direct results of gaming is that the friends you make as a young person, 13, 15, 18 years old, you connect with other people. Those are lifelong friendships. Those will extend out into the professional world, into your personal lives, and those connections, deep, important connections. And now we've got South African players, reunion players who are connecting with French players, with EU players, and that is enormously valuable. So I have this love-hate relationship with it. On the one hand, I hate the fact that it is quite possible a Spanish team will go to major to represent SSA. But for me, that's part of the short-term pain for the long-term gain. And while that might be true, you still have to suffer the pain, and suffering pain is never easy. So I feel like we are very firmly in the pain part of the process of getting better, of seeing more benefit. I do believe, and one of my faults is that I am an eternal optimist, and I always believe good things will come. And one of my optimisms is that I do believe some form of 2/3, 1/3 rule will come, because I absolutely do not want to go back to a time of hard region lock where, in the early days, Snowy from Limitless, he in 2019 went to England to see if he could compete in RLCS in EU, and I think he could have been a competitor there. But the rules were so hard, you couldn't play for Europe if you were in Europe on a tourist visa. You had to have a proper visa. It was very hard region lockdown. And I don't want to go back to that time. I think there has been too much benefit of our integration into the rest of the world. And I do think whether it's 2/3 or 1/3, I think, 2 European players teaming up with a local SSA player is fantastic. That is going to be wonderful for us. So yeah, it's been hard. It's been rough. And I feel for the established players now, because those are the ones that are going to lose out. People like, Werty still competing, maybe still got a crack at making a LAN, but the other players who were sort of 18, 19, 20 years old, it's kind of rough for them. But behind me here, you see that picture there, this little youngster here, that's Ravi. He's 14 years old. He's coming into a Rocket League scene. He doesn't know a time of when there wasn't open region and having to compete against EU. That's the fire he has to compete in. So he's never known an easy time of Rocket League. That's a huge benefit to him, and he is so good. And his teammate Devour, and they've got 3-4 years to develop in this cauldron, and I think they will benefit in the long term. Next to Ravi is over here is Guns. That's Guns. Plays for Cosmico, so you'll know him. An absolute, he can be one of SSA's greats, but he's on the cusp. He's 17 years old, so he's going to have to get there quickly. And I do think there's a coming meta where older players will have a place in the game. So I think he will benefit from this long term. It's a bit rough for him now because he came in. He could have been an easy top 2 regular every time. Could have gone to wildcard. Could have gone to Worlds. And then now we've got a bunch of Europeans. So he's absolutely being impacted. So the individual stories are a bit rough. But broadly as a region, if we are ever going to make a top 8 or a top 4 at an international LAN, we've got to go through this.
And it reminds me a lot of traditional sports. I know it's a bit of a hard comparison to make, esports and traditional sports, but we've got to think of each of these individual regions as their own leagues, and almost like the World Championship is the Champions League in your traditional football, soccer, wherever you come from. And these leagues do all have their own rules. They might have homegrown talent rules. They might have a specific nationality rules, like you mentioned before. A certain percentage of players or certain amount of players on your top 18 have to have a passport from the region and things like that. So when you're talking about a 1/3 rule, 2/3 rule, even if it was specific for SSA or specific for SSA and APAC or any of these minor regions, for me, that's still so needed. I think it does deserve that special attention, especially. And, if, Lord forbid, it was all Spanish going to all the majors for the rest of the season, which unfortunately there is a potential chance of that could be the case. I really do hope that forces some change. But like you said, there are some lights here. I do just want to shout out, we mentioned Cosmico. We've already mentioned Guns and Werty. Shout out Cams as well, who's on the roster. But there's that fourth man as well.
He's behind me.
But is that fourth man as well? It's LDC, the Belgian eFIFA World Cup coach himself, coming over to help free homegrown talent. I absolutely love that. I played him in a ranked game. He absolutely slapped me. He's a very experienced player. He's a very experienced coach. And I think it's really exciting to have someone like him building up talent instead of, maybe going on to a full Belgian roster or full French roster. He probably could do that theoretically. And there's a chance that if he was picking the right French players, they just come out of a lab, he could be going to majors with them as well. But you started on a bit of a discussion that I actually had on a watch party that I did during Open 1, when you were talking about import talent and how, you said the likes of Guns, for example, the Guns and Werty, they're in a time now where there is European talent to constantly practice with. I had someone in my Twitch chat ask me if I would rather that there was one dominating, we'll just say Maestros. We'll say if there was one Maestros roster, they completely dominate, they take the top spot half the time, but it's only them in the region. Or would I rather the kind of invasion, albeit that SSA has had this region for the time being? And I found that really difficult. I found that a really difficult question, because on the one hand, you would have one team, Maestros, likely taking first place spots. And, I've heard certain rumors about scrims. I don't know how much they're true. I'm sure you'd know a lot more than that than me. But either way, even if they are taking scrims with people local, you're not going to get as many scrims with talent than if we have this kind of takeover we have here right now, where there is still a higher chance of you actually coming at least against them in a qualifier, at least in, the double elimination stage. You can at least have somewhat of a practice in an RLCS setting against them. Would you rather have that, the kind of invasion we have now, where technically there's, less seats in the top 16, let's say, for homegrown talent? However, it is now more guaranteed that this homegrown talent is going to run into an EU team to at least get some practice off and, see their targets, let's just say, for what they have to take over next? Or would you rather have just one person coming in, taking that top spot, all the glory? People aren't exactly getting the practice, but, at least there's more seats in the top 16. And I thought that was an interesting discussion. And I think either way, they have to be considered in the short term, because I don't want either. I want a 2/3 rule.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've reached the point of what we prefer is kind of irrelevant, because we have to deal with what we have. And what we're having is more and more teams coming. And given that, I think it's probably the better of the circumstances, because there's a greater scope of opposition, and it does force us to think about the game more. It does force us to be a little more lateral in our thinking, and we are a region that has been dominated by one team for a long time. Before EU was here, we had Limitless or Orlando Pirates, whatever iteration of that roster has been. They have dominated, and we couldn't unseat them. And that's entirely on us. We have to be able to build the kind of talent where there can be competition. North America and Europe, they have conversations about your top four, and those top four or top six or even top 8. There's a very real possibility of any of those teams on a given weekend finishing in the top, coming first, coming second, being in the top 4. Whereas in SSA, we haven't been that. So I think the more the merrier. The more there is, the more the larger the scope for our improvement is. I think a one team domination, whether it's a European or SSA team, is not good long term for the region. So given the way that it is, bring it. We have no option to get. But what this has taught me is if you as a player hate it and you are broken by it, there are many other options for you in life. And I certainly wouldn't, and I don't begrudge anyone who goes, you know what, this is unfair, I don't like it, I'm moving on. Absolutely. But let me tell you, the belly and the fire in the belly of people like Ravi, Devour, T-Shao, Eagle, Willant out of Reunion, they just want to be good. They want to get better. They will overcome what they need to. And that's what we need. We need people with that determination to go, and I don't know what your podcast rules are with the swearing, but the guys are go, fuck it.
You can.
We got to get better. We got to grind. We got to go. And honestly, that's what we need. We can't wait to be saved by rules. And what I do know is that there are players, and there will be more, who will want to overcome the obstacles. Because what a great story one day when there's a top 4 team from SSA at a LAN, and can you imagine the video about that, the story of the the real what we had to overcome to be here and be champions? Man, that's fantastic, and it'll be a story for the ages. So it is what it is, and if you want to succeed, and it's supposed to be hard. If you want to get to the top of anything, it's not supposed to be like, oh, okay, I had to beat some GC1s along the way to be world champion. No. You had to grind. You had to, you had to shed tears and frustration, and that's true of any sport. The number 1 golfer in the world. Well, in my day it was Tiger Woods, and Tiger Woods, his dad was making him get up at 4:00 in the morning when he was 4 years old to go and hit balls on a green. That dude had to grind his entire life to get there. It's supposed to be hard. That's how it works. Anyway,
I just want to cement one thing you said, but you were talking about the story and how this is a part of it. I think too many people were looking at the 2024 season, or perhaps looking at this 2025 season like it's the ending. Yes. This is not the ending. This is, maybe the big evil Europe and NA coming over, but that's a bit at the beginning of the story. That's just establishing. 2024 was establishing who the quote unquote villains are. 2025 was the start of the fight. Still very much in the middle game for what is the story of SSA before all those youngsters and all those players that you were shouting out behind you are going to step up and take them over. And then, there's going to be that happy ending down the line where SSA is a lot more competitive at these majors. And I tell you what, you shouted out 3 out of 4 names behind you on those portraits. Why don't you shout out the 4th as well? Let's get them.
The last one is our local mechanical genius. That's To Die For, part of Limitless.
Yes,
an absolute genius of the game. So yeah, I will tell you this. And I believe this firmly. 2019, when I got involved in the community, if I had gotten the whole community around and said, hey, guys, we've got some news coming. SSA, we can play in the RLCS. However, we will have to compete with EU players, but they have to play on our servers. So they'll be on 180 ping. That's the downside. What do you think? Every Snowy, Sweaty, To Die For, Mr. Low, Skill Steel, all the giants who are CP Zebra, all the guys who were the big giants of the game back then, they would have lost their minds with excitement. They would have embraced it with open arms. It was only because we had 2 years of a cushy job, and then suddenly it's like that we're as frustrated as we are about it. But 5 years ago, if we had started this way, it would have been different.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have to 100% agree with that. And I am excited to see, like you said, I do think Limitless themselves have had a huge turnaround themselves individually. They look like a much stronger team in this 2025 season. I'm all for it. I'm very confident that I'll make the grand final. Of course, this is going to come out a bit later. So, if you're still watching here, tell us the results in the comments. Why not? Yeah. I might have forgotten by that time. But,
well, if you're watching in the future, wasn't that Cosmico Limitless Grand Final?
Yes. Let's hope either one of them's in the grand finals, and that didn't age horrendously. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Would not want to see Hay with Riz or Labosh. I'm sorry. I do like some of those players individually, but I will be back in Limitless for this one. But my goodness, what a story SSA has had so far. And of course, I feel like I wanted this podcast to be pretty entry level for people looking to get interested with SSA and get a general idea and an idea of what you are. Because if they want the real stuff, if you really want to understand SSA, the man right next to me on my screen, is where you go to, whether it's his Discord, his Twitter, his Twitch, his weekly podcast, which he runs himself and is a lot more in detail than this, like I said, rather entry-level podcast was. Where can they find you, my friend? Where are all those resources they can grab?
Greybeard GG on everything. So Greybeard GG on Twitter, in Discord, on Twitch. I even have a website, greybeard.gg,
yes!
so which talks about SSA Rocket League and how to get involved, the community, the competitive, who the content creators are, who the coaches are, all of that good stuff.
And I've seen you've had your eyes on creating events as well. So also, please, ladies and gentlemen, keep an eye out for all of those as well. They're always really great events. I'm always lurking around, let's just say, watching over everything that's happening. I've got my full faith in SSA. I'm going to be sending lots of love to SSA. I'm going to try and continue to cast it as much as I can as well, because honestly, the community is amazing. I mentioned it on a tweet the other day as well, where I was like, there's just something about SSA. It has its own spark. It has its own story. It's so unique from any other region. And it's just that you kind of have to be there. You have to be there. So I promote to anyone watching, please support, be there. Maybe not as a player. I'm not too sure on that. But, you know, at least show them your support. Show them your support. Big up Cosmico. Big up Limitless. Whoever it may be. Greybeard, I'm going to let you say whatever you want. Plug whatever you want for this final moment. And we might just call it a night.
Yeah, no, listen, we're SSA's doors are open. We are Rocket League's #1 destination. So come tourist destination. So come and find out about it. And I am always looking to find people who want to get involved in whatever capacity, even if it's just as a viewer, and or if you want to sponsor events, or if you want to coach, or if you do want to play and pick up some SSA players. We have the biggest esport community league, the RSC. That's the biggest community league in all of Sub-Saharan Africa. If you want to be involved in our RSC, get in touch. We always need people to help us push forward and go and do more. So in whatever way you want to be involved in SSA, we welcome you, and we will put you to work in whichever way we can, and we'd love to have you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. SSA, Greybeard, the oldest GC in the world, ? We'll say yes.
Oldest former GC, yeah, okay.
Well, you keep the title. You keep the title. That counts in my eyes. That counts in my eyes. It's like once you're a world champion, you're a world champion forever. You're a world champion forever. It's the same for the GC title. The oldest GC in the world joined us here for the DSQ Behind the Screens podcast. It was myself, Sir Pigasus. Please follow DSQ on all socials. Myself, Sir Pigasus, on all socials. And of course, our lovely esteemed guest, Greybeard, as well. Shout out to Fred Monster as well for doing all the production for us. It was an absolute pleasure of an episode. Thank you for your time, and goodbye.